So I was going to take a little break because I didn't think that there was going to be anything to talk about, at least not for the foreseeable future. Drama's pretty dry. There's a lot of bullshit going on, nothing too special. But then I saw something on my Twitter timeline, and then I saw other people covering this situation, and I was like, I might actually have some slop to talk about today. So this video is going to be about being betrayed, more specifically about a video that was made in regards to being betrayed by this person known as ETK Creates. And the reason why I'm making this video is for the same reason why I make any of my other videos, because there is very fair criticism to make here. Now, to add some background for those of you who might be a bit curious, this girl recently got a lot of attention on Twitter because of this silly picture, which I will blur because this person is a minor, and alongside that also dropped this thread that aimed to expose being betrayed for a lot of her very degenerate behavior. Now, don't get me wrong, being betrayed is an absolute lunatic, a completely disgusting individual that should have probably gotten her internet access removed a long time ago, but that still doesn't change the fact that this person, ETK, created a very egregious video with some information that isn't entirely substantiated. So why am I talking about this video now, of all times? Well, it's because this guy was actually self-promoting himself in that very same thread, so it got a lot of attention, particularly by me and others in the commentary scene who found his video a little bit concerning because of where his priorities lie. Now, what do I mean by that? Typically, when creating content, I usually have a pyramid of priorities that I go by when criticizing people, because I'm not going to criticize somebody for something stupid and outlandish such as racism if it doesn't pertain to something more serious such as false allegations or spreading misinformation, or potentially things such as preying on children or being unsafe to children. For example, somebody like EDP, I'm not saying he is transphobic, but if he were, I wouldn't criticize him for being transphobic. I would criticize him for being a danger to children and quite literally attempting to meet up with a minor. So for the sake of clarification, I'm going to be criticizing ETK Creates for some things that I would consider a little bit negligent or irresponsible. Now, there are three major issues that ETK discussed in his video. Racism, pedo baiting, and running a server that was unmoderated where issues such as the distribution of CP occurred. Now, guess which one of these topics was the one that was covered in detail for the majority of the video and was considered to be the worst and most egregious example of Betrayed being a horrible individual? And if you guessed racism, then you'd be right on the money, baby, right on the money.
To start off with the strongest thing, with the thing there's the most evidence of, and probably in my own personal opinion, the worst thing that Ray has done across the board, racism.
Now, to ETK, this is the worst thing Betrayed has done in his opinion. That's fair, but that's exactly why I'm bringing up the idea of priorities. You see, in this video, he spent 7 to 8 minutes exploring Betrayed's history of being what I personally perceive as her being an edgy, terminally online weirdo. He spends a lot of time discussing the fact that she Asian baits, that she says slurs, that she's incredibly racist, and there is evidence to all of this, don't get me wrong, but there are objectively worse things that come up in ETK's coverage that is significantly above racism. Now, don't get me wrong, if ETK feels that racism is the worst thing here, that is his prerogative. He's entitled to that opinion, but you have to understand that when you are making a video attempting to expose or dissect the degenerate behavior in individuals, such as your title presents, and then loosely mention issues such as pedo baiting and the distribution of CSAM, there should be a level of awareness and in tandem, a level of responsibility to be objective in regards to what issues have the most priority in terms of what's worse. That's not to say that I'm entirely against ETK's presentation of what he values. That's more to say that in regards to the person you are covering, there are definitely worse things you mention or show us in this video.
Ray's history of degeneracy literally spans from extremely problematic to openly disgusting to cringe. It's a layered thing.
Now, I'm not sure if you guys caught what she said in that screenshot where he calls her being disgusting, but she's literally soliciting herself for Robux. Now, the particular issue I have with this part here is that instead of spending time giving insight discussing the dangers of a minor like this potentially distributing CSAM and why she is potentially the victim of horrible internet circumstances, instead he goes on a diatribe about how she's horrible for being edgy and throwing up Nazi salutes. Like I said earlier, there are priorities here and there are multiple angles to the situation. People are already hating on this person, and for good reason. However, there is a level of responsibility when looking into people like this. Sometimes we have to take a second to pause and think, yeah, this person is awful, but she's also potentially being exploited by horrible actors, and she should probably disconnect herself from the internet. Like, I don't care that she's being racist or throwing up Nazi salutes, something that only edgy morons would do. I care about the fact that she's potentially being complicit in criminal activity, such as distributing CSAM. This actually brings me into a comment by Smaggle, which pretty much encapsulates my concerns as well, and he says, "This is an actual dog shit video. You say that she's very racist while also saying she's too white to be Asian. You say her being racist and homophobic is the biggest thing in the video while also showing her say she sold her body for Robux. And the fact you never show anything in the Discord while confidently saying she endorsed people sending CP and doxes to each other. By the way, she's a minor. Who cares if she's racist? This is true. There is a level of hypocrisy in ETK's video. He spent the vast majority of the video, at least 80% of the runtime, calling her out for being racist, while he himself denies the idea she could be Asian and says she has too many Eurocentric features to even remotely pass as Asian. I don't know about you, but that level of feature policing in and of itself is racist.
Example, she lied about being Asian. She's not. Clearly, she is, if she is Asian at all, it is a very slight amount of Asian because she still has very Eurocentric features.
In fairness to ETK, I don't think it's incorrect for him to be appalled at her behavior, especially him being black, as he mentions in the video. He does have that entitlement, but she is a minor, and there are things that deserve more scrutiny and integrity than race checking someone. Like this part of his video, for example.
So as a creator, if you create a space for your followers to interact, it's up to you to moderate it in the discussion. The space in question was a Discord server. For obvious reasons, I cannot show examples of this, nor did I ask for anything visual relating to it. But Ray had a Discord server that went unmoderated. Racism, homophobia, edgy humor were the slightest concern in the server. The biggest issues were open conversations glamorizing self-harm, the spread and consuming of CP, and of course open discussions of doxing and cybercrime. Ray, through her friendships, her community, her partners, and a number of other things, has enabled and partaken in, whether she directly or indirectly did, in multiple instances, the sharing of CP, open cybercrime, pedophilia, self-harm normalization, animal abuse, child abuse, and a number of other things. Not to mention, this server was just a cesspool full of e-boy gooners. If you're a creator and you are responsible for the spaces you curate, a lack of ability to properly moderate a space to be at least semi-safe means you shouldn't have a space whatsoever, and you're not capable of dealing with a platform. Not to mention, through all of these things I mentioned previously, it's really safe to say she allowed these things to happen, because she either didn't care or genuinely liked the space she had curated for herself and did not care.
Okay, look, he's not wrong. You do have a responsibility as a creator to moderate the spaces you create for your audience. However, you can't be accusing somebody of facilitating or even enacting in the distribution of CP or other crimes without actually having substantiation for those claims. And how does he know any of this is happening, apparently? Well, he really doesn't, because he didn't actually see any of that stuff going on in his server. He's just making the claim. This brings me to his reply to Smaggle. Smaggle, she quite literally isn't Asian. She said so in the messages when questioned. She called Asian people slurs and said she wasn't Asian. 2, there are many Twitter posts and screenshots you can find of her selling her body for Robux, talking about wanting to be groomed, saying she loves pedos, and they are in the video. The server is common knowledge. I spoke to her ex-friends, her ex-partners, peoples from her server. It's real. It was too much for the video. You don't care about racism, and that's your flaw. Your ignorant Ray has videos and screenshots of her admitting to selling her body for Robux. One is in the video. You're genuinely an idiot. Get out of my comments and do your research. I don't think he understands what Smaggle was actually saying in his comment, because the main concern is that there are bigger issues at hand than racism as he presented in his video. He's not refuting the fact that she's soliciting herself. He's refuting the idea that you were talking about something without evidence, which, as you claim in your own comments, you just talked to people about it. You didn't see anything yourself, yet you're peddling these allegations. It's also ironic that he says anything in regards to research when he himself in his own description says, to clarify, this video is primarily about the history of racism from her. I mentioned other things, but if I didn't show pictures of it, it's alleged from me at least. However, the alleged things are so nasty that I didn't want to make full segments about them. So you yourself didn't even attempt to substantiate these claims. You're just going off word of mouth, which unfortunately just isn't enough. If you are too much of a coward to research these things, then you probably shouldn't be including them in a video that is getting almost 150,000 views. As a creator that is attempting to get this level of viewership, you have a sort of obligation to make sure that the information that you're peddling is verifiable and has some sort of substantiation behind it. I also want to speak about a broader issue. This entire video is essentially a hit piece on somebody race baiting, trying to guilt her for being white, when objectively this person is a victim of a lot of different issues here. He even vaguely acknowledges this very issue in his video.
And has multiple servers where she has people who attract to her the kind of thing she's into spaces where there are lots of people who discover her on TikTok TikTok, kids that just play Roblox, or people who are just interacting with her bare minimum. They come into these spaces with a lot of weird people because, again, you figure if Ray is a disgusting individual, misery loves company. I definitely think the people she keeps around her are just like her or even worse, and we can see by screenshots the way other people interact with her. Clearly they are.
Now, it's one thing to make a video highlighting somebody's problems to correct them, and it's another thing to make a hit piece morally grandstanding over them when that person is actually a minor who so happens to be a victim of a lot of terrible things on the internet. And like I said in the beginning, there's a level of priority when it comes to situations like these, and the last thing that I'd acknowledge here is how this person is a racist. The first thing I'd acknowledge is the fact that this person is potentially a danger to herself, a danger to other minors, and also is possibly being exploited by others that are significantly more mature than her. Another issue that I want to bring up at all that I haven't really seen people talk about in regards to this video is that you yourself acknowledge that there is some sort of external issues with this person. You acknowledge that she attracts horrible people. You acknowledge that she sells her body, and you acknowledge, although without evidence, that there is potentially the distribution of CSAM in her server. You acknowledge all of these issues in your video or in response to other people in your comments, yet despite that, you don't seem to do your due diligence in censoring her or straight up just not showing some of her most compromising images. Like, why would you show pictures of her feet in your video? That's a huge oversight. That is a minor. There is a level of obligation you have to make sure that she is no longer being viewed by potentially disgusting people. Truthfully, ETK doesn't seem like a bad guy. I feel like his heart is in the right place, but it's easy to tell he's a complete amateur with his priorities in the wrong place. I don't want to outright shit on his prerogatives, but the way this video was executed is not the greatest. I'm just going off vibes. I could be wrong, I could be right, but ETK just doesn't really feel like a terrible dude. This video could be better, and that's why I'm giving my thoughts. I don't want to step on his toes too much, but if you're making videos on people that get hundreds of thousands of views and don't do your due diligence in some instances, you should definitely get a wake-up call to avoid making mistakes or oversights. He's entitled to his opinion, such as being concerned for the racism, but there is a level of egregious mishaps in this video. I don't particularly want to be mean to this guy. Now, while I could stretch out this video and talk about significantly more issues at hand, I don't really want to milk his content. I just want to say, hey, maybe we should be concerned about these things instead of racism, which is irrelevant in the grand scheme of her actually being a victim. So you take that as you will. That being said, that's all I really got for today. Yeah, later.